Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, wherever you are joining from. Welcome to our third observance of World Day of the Boy Child. We will have amazing presentation and also a panel discussion. Before we get into that, I just want to go through just an introduction and some information about our organization. Today's topic is actually bullying and boys' mental health. We would like to welcome our special guest and all of you wherever you are joining from. This year, 2023, it will be observed in more than 25 countries around the world. Before I start, basically, Voice of Men 360 is a non-profit organization founded in 2020 and is based in Toronto, London, Ontario. Voice of Men 360 was born out of seeing the tremendous needs for boys and men in society. Voice of Men 360 stepped up to support and help them in many areas of their lives. On May 16th, World Day of the Boy Child is celebrated worldwide every year to recognize and support boys who improve and support the world, their families, and communities. World Day of the Boy Child follows 10 core principles, which is the overall well-being of boys and around the globe. Let me skip the core principles. I will display it later on. As I said, today's theme or this year's theme is boys and their mental health. And the topic that we're going to discuss, bullying and mental health. Boys face their share of problems in the world of today. Too many homes are without fathers, depriving them of that essential role model necessary for proper development into adulthood. Such boys are significantly more likely to face bullying, mental health, illiteracy, incarceration, addiction, violence, suicide, homelessness, etc. at some point in their lives. That's why we want to have a discussion on this topic today. Welcome to our third observance. Thank you all the speakers for accepting our request to participate in our special panel discussion, especially to Al Johnson for the special presentation today is on bullying. Bullies Be Gone project, 19-module comprehensive online and in-person training, and year-round curriculum for schools, youth organizations, and sports teams, grades 4 to 12, and adults, and households. Al Johnson is an anti-bullying expert, trainer, and coach, and a teacher. He has nearly over 38 years of experience in this field. Thank you, Al, for your project and for being part of our the observance. Let me bring Al. Al, you are muted. So I just want to ask you a question. If you can turn your camera just a little bit down, we can see your full face. Thank you. I want to start asking the influence or inspiration. Where did you start, or what's the reason? How did you start?
Thank you, Svim, for having me, and pleasure to be with all the other panel members, distinguished panel members. My inspiration started when I was teaching high school, actually, and I was teaching special education, and I was also teaching the martial arts in one of the beach cities in California, and there was a huge child molestation case going on in this one particular city. And I was teaching the martial arts through their rec department. And long story short, they called me and asked me one day if I would start a program that was not a full-blown karate program, but one that would teach children safety, awareness, self-confidence, anti-bullying, and good social skills. I accepted the challenge, and I've been doing that since 1985.
Thank you, Al. Let's start with the presentation, though.
Okay, we'll start off with, I think you went through the introduction with me, so if you go to the next slide with the audience. In the next slide, we're talking about, this is basically how I present the program, and we present the program this is not the whole comprehensive 19 modules, of course, but it's a beginning process. So if you go to the second slide, and the third, please. Okay, what we want to do is that this is an interactive program. So in the interactive aspect of it, we want children, and we're talking about boys mainly today at this presentation, we want them to display critical thinking in writing and bring out their creativity. And they do that through the poetry that we have in the particular program. And then they're awarded. And now what we're doing and we'll be doing going forward is teaching teachers how to teach the 19 module curriculum, and we'll be there just for consultations and helping out and so forth. Next slide, please. This slide is an illustration. All the poems in the program, and there are over 78 of them, they're all original, and they're all teaching and training poems. Some of them, it's a child talking to the bully. Some of it's a bully talking to the child. Some of it's both talking within the same poem. This particular one is to demonstrate some of the hateful words that go around and that are spewed out from child to child. And so this is the beginning process of them understanding what some of these hateful words, and just by illustration, are, and by illustrations, what type of effect it could have on a particular child. And this could be an effect that will last a lifetime if we don't do something to eliminate it. Next slide, please. And as you can see, without reading the poem, there's a poem right behind the illustration. Now the kids will be asked to, first of all, what's the theme of that illustration that you just saw? What do you think the theme and the main idea of the illustration is, in your own words? Then after we go through that, we go to the poem itself. And the poem itself, it's all highlighted boldly now, but in only portions of it. This particular one has everything highlighted. And the reason why it's highlighted in bold is because we want them to be able to emphasize on some of those stanzas, words, and phrases within the poem. The children will perform, the teacher will read the poem first with voice inflections and emotions and conviction, and then the children will read the poem. And then we have them interpret to what is the main idea of that poem. And we'll get various different answers, of course, and they'll tell us what they think the main idea is. And we'll discuss each and every stanza of that poem and how it applies to bullying. Then at the very end, we will say, now we would like for you to write your own hateful words poem. And we get some tremendous responses from children throughout the process. Next slide, please. Again, on this particular one, my difference is my strength. This is really, and we have children performing the poem on tape, the poems from 9 years of age all the way up to 18 years of age. And my difference is my strength illustration in poem is we want children to understand that whatever they are, however they're built, however they talk, do they have a deficiency of any type whatsoever, we don't want them to feel, and we teach them in the Bullies Be Gone project, that your difference is not your weakness, whether it's the color of your skin, whatever it happens to be. Your difference is your strength. And so as long as you realize that, and we pound that in over a period of time and through our training. Next slide, please. And mental toughness is another poem illustration. We're just showing illustrations on these. we teach children and adults, actually, because we've taught adults some of the same thing with the same type of training that you're seeing. My mental toughness. And we want, what is your mental toughness? Do you know what mental toughness is? I was just working with a kid just yesterday and wasn't quite sure what mental toughness meant. So we went through it and told them this is why it's very important that you have positive mental toughness if you want to offset the negativity that the bully is trying to bestow upon you. Next slide, please. The poetry, the music, the storytelling, and role-playing unite to eliminate and prevent bullying. So what are we teaching? Discipline, determination, and dedication, which is school-related. Concentration and focus, school-related. Physical fitness and self-confidence, life and school-related. Mental toughness and positive self-empowerment, school and life-related. Respect, responsibility, self-control, school, community, and life-related. Relaxation and positive mindset, school, community, and life-related. And you can see at the end, bullying, hate, fighting, and violence are not listed because they're not taught. Many times administrators will ask me, well, you're a martial art master. Do you teach children to fight to solve a bullying problem? I says, no, never. We discourage that. What we do teach is we teach children how to escape and get away from a bullying encounter. And the reason we do that is because 99.9% of the time, when a kid is being bullied, there's no adult there to help them. The adult comes after the fact. So why not know how to get away and get out of there? Next slide, please. But never fighting. Oh, next slide, please. That's our song. A bully's words and actions are meant to deflate and destroy a child's, teens, and adult self-confidence. Deflate and destroy child's, teens, and adult self-esteem. And whether this occurs face-to-face or whether it occurs online. So in the Bullies Be Gone project, we want to offset that with our comprehensive training. Next slide, please. The effects of words. Words can deflate, harm, hurt, and even kill. Words can build self-confidence, empower, inspire, and heal. So the words in the Bullies Be Gone project are effective in doing the latter. Again, with original poetry, music, role-playing, storytelling, and more. It's very interactive. And having taught 25 years in the special education classroom at the high school level, I've had a lot of interactions with children, positive, negative, and in between. Next slide, please. We go first into awareness training. And I want children to because in a day and time where there's so much electronics out there and cell phones, children are not aware, even adults. We see adults walking down the streets with their heads buried into their cell phones, and children too. And we want to ask them, we train them, says, what does awareness mean to you? Well, now they're writing and they're involved. What is your definition of being aware? What do you think it means to be keenly street and internet aware? Are there any additional ways you can think of where awareness applies to bullying? So now they're into writing and giving their own answers, and we tell them there are no wrong answers. We want you to write what you think, and then we'll discuss it. Next slide, please. And you can see some of the awareness trainings that we actually role play. Safer side of the street to walk on, blind spots, safer place on the sidewalk to walk. And obviously, if you're obviously being followed by someone, what do? Your cell phone. I go over the cell phone with them and tell them how it can be detrimental it can be advantageous to the bully and the person who is thinking in a harmful and criminal manner. So we walk through the ways to actually out in public use or not use your cell phone. And the 3 R's, it's at the very beginning of our training, and those 3 R's stand for relax, react, and respond. And children role play that, and we go over it over and over again, and we tell them the absolute importance of those 3 R's because they lead into the other aspects that can effectively prevent a bullying from happening. Next slide, please. The initial emotional impact of children and teens when they are bullied. over my 25 years of teaching school and 35 years of teaching this program to thousands of children, teens, and adults, I've asked the question, how did you immediately feel when you were confronted by the bully the first time? Over 35 years, the majority of answers that I've gotten, without a doubt, have been, I did not know what to say. I did not know what to do. I was scared and confused. I felt lousy and weak. And we tell them, now we're going to train you where all these particular emotional feelings that are not advantageous for you, we're going to change them so you will no longer feel these four emotional aspects of your life, because being bullied can last a lifetime. And I've talked to adults who've told me that, and certain things have happened to me that I still can't get out of my mind, but now I know how to handle it a lot better after devising the program. Next slide, please. And through all this training, we want to leave children, teens, and even adults with a motto to go by. We want them to, on this slide, it says, we read it to them. And it says, now we want you to read this every day. And we want to embed it in your mind. And basically what someone says about you or to you, no matter how hateful or nasty it is, should not determine how you feel about yourself. What is important is the way you allow the bully's negative words to affect who you really are. No one has the right or power to make you feel bad, defeated, sad, or insignificant unless you give them that power. You're not going to allow that to happen ever, especially after you've gone through the Bullies Be Gone project training. And that's my presentation. I'm open to questions from the audience, the panel. And again, I'm so happy to be here, and it's an honor to work to help boys and young men continue on the right track and get off of the wrong track. Thank you.
Thank you, Al. Really amazing program. What to say, man? Really appreciate that. And what I want to ask you is that to contact you, of course, the email address and the website, if you have it.
Correct.
So one thing I want to ask you is that there are a couple of questions. How old are the youth in this program?
The age?
Yeah.
The age, it begins at age 9 and up to age 18. When I first started the program, it was ages 5 to 15, but years ago I said, no, I got to go a little higher. So it's 9 for school age children, 9 to age 18. So that's basically 4th grade through 12th grade. And then for adults, 18 and over, certain aspects of the program, quite a bit of it applies to adults too. But that's the age span. Nice.
And the other question is, of course, how are they recruited?
How they do what? I'm sorry, Sven.
How are they recruited?
How will they equal it?
No, recruited.
Oh, recorded.
No, recruited.
Oh, I'm sorry. How are they recruited?
Yeah.
They are recruited basically now through schools.
Mm-hmm.
And we go through schools, we go to the administrators, and we just finished with one school, and we have a contract with another school starting up in the fall, and hopefully we'll have tons of schools by then. And they're recruited that way. They're recruited through, let's say, the PTA. They're recruited through youth organizations. They're recruited through parents and businesses, because people working in businesses have children. And so we try and then we're open to any other way of suggestion. And now the program can be done 100% online. And we're standing by to do any presentations that needed. There are books involved. The main poetry book, if I can hold it up, looks like this. That's the main poetry book that the kids work out of. They have a workbook for themselves. There is a workbook for the teacher for the 19-module curriculum, and they're recruited, sometimes by their friends.
There's a comment. I think you guys can see it. Can you guys see it?
Yeah, I'm looking at it now.
Yeah. While you guys are looking at, I just have a couple of things to add on that. So, what kind of like response you got in the last 30 years or 38 years?
So I got the responses are overwhelming. Sometimes, someone put in the chat, is a program just for boys and men? Oh no, this is for girls and women. it's for all children. Believe me. And in fact, and when I taught at an opportunity high school, which was my first job, all the school was comprised of 7th through 12th graders, and it was 98 girls and 98 boys. And they wasn't even co-ed. It's what's called a continuation high school. These were, quote, deviant teenagers who've been bumped out of other schools. And some of the most violent and impacting stuff that was going on in the school was by girls and not by boys. I hated to break up a fight between two girls as opposed to two boys. It was just vicious. So to get back to your question, repeat your question again, Savannah, I got sidetracked.
Yeah, it's okay. I mean, partially you answered the questions. However, I was asking how was the response from even parents or some of the youth that you have trained?
I have tons of testimonials. Some of them are just absolutely heartwarming. I had a 14-year-old young lady, because we have original music in the program too, anti-bullying and social skills music that myself and my engineer have written and produced in studio. And she wanted to be, I was recruiting for children to perform the poetry from the poetry book, actually perform it, just put on as if they were on stage. So we sent in a video, I sent in the song to a particular parent. The parent said, Mr. Johnson, and she said, my daughter, her name was Marla, I won't use her last name, 14 years of age. She says she heard your song and she wants to write you a letter. And I said, write me a letter, that's fine. And in her letter, she simply said that the song itself, the words in the song, the words were so impacting to her. She had been bullied since 5th grade, she said, and now she's 14. She says, I realized when I was hearing the words in that song that I don't have the problem, the bully has the problem. And I feel empowered. And I want to thank you very much for that. That just from the words in the song. This is what she said. And I have many, many testimonials that absolutely make me feel pretty good.
Yeah, that's sometimes it's crazy and sometimes it's amazing stories we come across. Thank you. Really appreciate your experience and also the presentation and the module you are creating. It is a huge platform. I wish, or I don't know, like whether we have it in Canada. Are you only just doing quickly? Is this just happening in USA, or are you reaching out to any other countries though?
Yeah, we're branching out, and in fact, we had we were talking to someone from Nigeria now, and because we realized in our investigation there and our research, other countries are having bullying problem also. So we want to expand, of course, across the country and in the United States, and then we want to go internationally.
Very nice, very nice. Hopefully, we can bring you, whoever is listening this presentation or watching the presentation, we can bring you to Canada too. Probably we can do a couple of workshops and other initiatives. Absolutely. I'm really sorry that it's you can see probably more than 1 hour presentation and a discussion, but you showed it to 15 minutes, 10 minutes. So I'm really sorry, Johnson. We can bring you back. We are moving to next segment, which is going to be the panel discussion. And before I go in there, I just want to have a quick the disclaimer. We would like to remind you that the Voice of Men 360's mission is always delivered with the good faith and toward peaceful harmony. The views and opinions expressed in today's episodes are those of our speakers, do not represent Voice of Men 360. Our organization engages in discussion forums to offer inspiration and create awareness of the issues of men who wish to overcome of their challenges. We are not providing medical or therapeutic advice. Should you require that type of assistance, we recommend you contact a medical professional immediately. If you have questions or concerns about today's episode or any Voice of Men 360 content, please email us at info@voiceofmen360.org. Let's just, all right. So I just want to bring the next segment, which is the panel discussion. But I want to introduce amazing, talented person here, Dr. Vinita Puri. She's an adjunct professor at Yorkville University, teaching the Masters of Arts in Counselling Psychology program and the Doctoral Counseling Psychology (DCP) program. She has the following credential: Doctorate in IO Psychology, MSW, RSW, MPhil, BA. I'm really thankful, Vinita, for having you here. We are honored to hear, and she always support us, and she always introduce a lot of people. Here you go, Vinita.
Thank
Take
you
it.
so much. It's really an honor to be here, and thank you so much, Sivam, for inviting me. This is a topic that is near and dear to my heart. On a personal level, I was bullied as a youth, and it really changed the trajectory for my life. It made me want to become a social worker, to make a difference in the world, to really empower youth. To, just as Al was speaking, I was just I wish there were things like that when I was younger. It just took me a long time to finally like who I was. And I realized that words are so powerful and they can really be impactful. So thank you so much. I mean, what you do is amazing. And I'm so, excited to have this wonderful panel discussion with these esteemed panelists. They're all amazing. They all have so much to contribute, and they're really, truly social change makers. And that's what we're here to do today. Not just to talk, not just to have a conversation, but to raise awareness out there in the public about the harmful effects of bullying and how that can affect somebody's mental health and how that can ripple out into the world, because really it starts in the home. Bullying can begin on an individual level, but then it's the family, the community, the world. There are so many forms of bullying. And we're going to talk about that a little bit today. And this is going to be a little bit of a tapas or a little bit of a taste of this larger subject, because it is an enormous subject. So without further ado, what I'm going to do is just start by who's on my screen. Again, just as a reminder, as a disclaimer, I know that this topic can be triggering for a lot of people, and it's important to hear your voice. And we do want to take comments as we go. So I will be monitoring the chat box. But, please be respectful of your comments, and you can speak from yourself, but please do not generalize for any group of people that this is what we think, or, just if you can try to do that, that would be really appreciated. And we may have to, disconnect with you if there's anything that comes up that's inappropriate, but I don't foresee that happening here. So let's get started. So what I'm going to ask is the people on my screen, if you can first just maybe introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're passionate about this topic. Why do you think this is an important subject to discuss? So on my right is Charles. And Charles, if you can unmute your mic and introduce yourself, that would be great.
Well, good morning and good afternoon and good evening. Because right now in Namibia here, it's good evening right now. To all the panelists who are here, and all the listeners who are listening to us, I'm Charles Simakumba, the co-founder of the White Ribbon Campaign Namibia. This is a project that is working with men and boys on violence preventions. We work with boys in schools and also we work with men in the community and also within the workplace on the issue of gender-based violence and masculinity or manhood. So it's an organization that was founded here 18 years ago in 2000. Yes, so I'm focusing more on this. Currently in Namibia here, we have a high rate of bullying in our schools. And we go to schools and about the effects of bullying. Like I like the way our Johnson put up his program. It's just like speaking from my heart, because
Mm.
we do approach boys and no, bullying is now high in our schools. So what we do is we train these boys and we sensitize them and we encourage them to refrain from this bullying. And we have been doing this work for more than 18 years right now. I've been working with boys, and this has become my. I'm passionate about working with boys as a teacher, also by profession, and I've also seen a lot of boys leaving schools. And just because of saying I'm afraid of there is someone at school is after me, and many of and also the academic performance and most of our young boys is now becoming lower and lower due to bullying in our schools, and they are even telling me that more I won't attend the school, or I'm not going back to school anymore again because the school is no longer safe right now. And so we came up with the programs like our Johnson is saying right now here that no, we need to come up with a program because schools now supposed to be a good learning environment for our children. But right now in our country here, in Namibia here, I'm speaking from Namibian's perspective, has become now a ground environment where children go to school with knives. Can you imagine?
Oh,
Supposed to
wow.
go to school with their books and all, but now every child is carrying a knife in his bag. And when we ask them through the workshops and meeting we hold with them, they say, well, I'm carrying this knife because it's protecting me from being bullied at school. These are some of the issues that we need to address, and we are busy addressing these issues in Namibia right now. Our schools now have been invaded by bullying and knives. So everywhere you
No,
go, every boy
terrible,
child in our school in Namibia here,
terrible.
they are carrying knives. So knives have become a norm in this country. Over to you, Avanti, Doctor.
Thank you, Charles. Wow, that's very powerful. Thank you for introducing yourself. So, Al, I know you already introduced yourself before, but if you'd like to say anything at all to add to why you're passionate about this subject and why you got into it. I know you said you were a teacher before, you were teaching self defense and you got into this, but is there any other reasons why you feel like passionate towards this subject?
Well, very similar to what the gentleman from Namibia, Charles, was talking about, is that I know growing up, I grew up in the United States during times of overt segregation and discrimination. So
Mm,
I realized that as a child, it was very confusing to me why I couldn't go this way, or why I couldn't go to this restaurant, or why I had to do
mm,
this and that. This was in the 50s and 60s. So that was racial bullying right there.
mhm.
And
Yeah.
then we'd go back to our own neighborhood, and then there was bullying within our own neighborhood, our own segregated neighborhood. So it was a compacted thing.
Mm,
But I, at that point in time, I never thought I would be doing something like this. I wanted to play Major League Baseball. And it wasn't until I finished college that it just hit me that I'm not pursuing what I think God put me here to do and to pursue.
mm,
And when the opportunity came across from the rec department, and they specifically approached me and said, "Can you start a program, an anti-bullying program, or an anti-molestation program for children?" And I'm going and teach them awareness, self-confidence, and like Charles was saying, because I have confronted kids at school with knives too,
mm,
but not to the degree that Charles was talking about. But I've been involved
Yes.
in the weapon aspect also. So it became when I first started it
Hmm.
and 37 years ago, I knew that this was a goal that was meant for me, and I wanted to be a household name. And more than anything, I wanted to be able to transform the lives of these young men and young women who can very easily go off path. So I don't want to take up too much of the time.
Oh,
But for
thank
us,
you. I'm really glad you brought up racial bullying because, as I was saying in the beginning, there are so many types of bullying, and we will get into that. But yeah, I know in the States, gun violence is also huge, right? It's a huge topic as well. Okay, let's go on to Daniel. Daniel, could you introduce yourself?
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. It's an honor to be here, and lots of experiences that I think all of us have had in our different ways. I won't go into too many specifics, except I just want to mention a few words that have already kind of come up as I've been, absorbing some of the things we've been talking about. Words like safe, learning, empowerment. Another thing that's like really dear to my heart and a big part of what's brought me into the career I have as a therapist is a passion for dialogue, for conversation, for hearing different voices. And I think that's like exactly sort of at the heart of a lot of what we've heard already, and hopefully we'll continue to hear. And yeah, I think there's a whole wealth of reasons to try to sort of bring ourselves together, and there's like a whole endless number of ways that we divide ourselves from each other. And I love what Al said, for example, about how differences can be sources of strength, right? And sometimes our differences can be areas of weakness and vulnerability, and at the same time they can be amazing gifts that we have to offer. So anyway, thank you again, everyone, and I look forward to the dialogue.
It's beautiful. And Miss Azi Razbani.
Hello. Nice to be here with everyone. It's an honor. So I'm Ozzy, and just a bit about my background. I'm a professor, I'm a researcher, and I'm a clinician. 25 years in the field, in a macro capacity as well, like community development as well as micro. I'm currently the clinical director of Mindco Mental Health and Wellness Boutique. And so majority of my experience, clinical experience, has been with children, youth, and families. I am super passionate about this topic because I have been a part of research initiatives, school-based bullying prevention programs in high schools in Toronto area. And I'm familiar with the research. And as a clinician, I genuinely see the impact, the short-term impact and the long-term impact, going back to some of the things that the colleagues shared around even adults holding on to, really traumatic incidents of being bullied, and it really carries forward throughout your life. So just really passionate about spreading love and making young people realize their potential, because they often don't even see it. So I'm super passionate and a huge child advocate. So it's such an honor to be here. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And last but not least, Billy, could you introduce yourself?
I'm not sure if I'm unmuted.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, I'm Bill Williams, Billy George Williams. I like to want to hear a little bit about this event today. I'm sorry, it's early in the morning. Anyways, that I like this event because years ago, when I was in the 60s, I was bullied in school and continued on through mostly up to grade 4 and 5 and grade 6. And and through the years, even into adulthood, being bullied by other people, what I found is that, just from my experience, is that most of the people that are bullies
Mhm.
have learned these behaviors from their mom or dad.
Mm.
And what I liked about the previous speaker and what she said, that introducing the emotions of love.
Mhm.
I'm a great person of love and compassion and understanding, even upon the person that's a bully, in that there is no, or they may, a large portion of these people have not had that experience.
Mm.
And what I do, I'm president of International United Native Nations 510, where I've been involved with people in Australia, New Zealand, and South Africa, where I've talked with people like this through Zoom or email, and talked about people that have been bullied and what they've done. And some of these people like myself had tried committing suicide.
Yeah.
That's a large portion of what needs to be addressed as well, because it's a hidden factor um, in our area where it's just, it's not taught to
Mhm.
the psychologists, to the doctors, to the specialists, in that some of these people are unaware because it's not talked about. And that's what I like to address too. And what I found is that being involved, with the people that have been bullied, but also be involved with the person that is a bully, because
Mm. Yeah.
he or she, because I've been bullied by both,
Right.
in that when I got involved with the men, the boys and girls lives,
Mm.
because I've been on my own since I was 13. I won't get into that, but
Mhm.
anyways, in that I um, I was born with club feet, born deaf. So most of
Mm.
my life, in my younger years, I was an observant,
Mm.
and I observed people's lives, both from the people that got bullied and the person that is bullied.
Mm.
And when I got involved with the person that's a bully,
Mm.
is that there's no love, there's no understanding, compassionate. It's actually a trait that's the bully, the mom and or dad is abusive or verbally or aggressive or what have you, especially in words,
Mhm.
have been bullied themselves. So it's a trait handed down the line. And
Mhm.
what I do is, when I talk to the person that is a bully, that like the previous speaker, is to break this bond, break this chain,
Mm.
and how do we do this? What I do in the Native community, First Nations community here in Canada, or where I am here in Campbell River and on Vancouver Island,
Mm.
is that we're part of 14 nations. And what I've done in the past up until now is I have dinners
Mm.
with the not only the person but the parent or parents, because in today's society, mom doesn't cook, so the father leaves. That's kind of stupid, but that's what happens. And so there's the single parent or parent, and I get to know these people on a more personal basis to find out who, what, and why, and what's going on in the family.
Mm.
And I'm a firm believer of being an example
Mm.
of what it means to love and have compassion,
It's
understanding,
beautiful.
as it's not shown and it's not taught, and there's not that example.
Mhm.
And also to teach the person that is a bully to break the chain.
Mhm.
And at times, truthfully, I've been beaten up a few times by the bully until I got through sometimes 1 year, 2 years, 5 years, or even long after school. A bully got to the point where today shotguns and handguns are brought to school by elementary schools. You know,
Yeah.
that's how far it's gone. You know, and I am. I won't get into that, but you
Mm.
know, this bully, he. I was running a church and for street people, and he came to my church to shoot me. And
Wow.
so I'm a firm believer of God, and I just asked God to stop him, and God did.
Yeah.
And that's why I just said, ask God if he could get rid of whatever is in him, anger from his parent or whatever it is that's in him, to get rid of it.
Mhm.
2 years later, I ran into him in Vancouver, and I was scared, and he was scared, is what he told me later. And he apologized for what he has done.
Mhm.
And it's
Mhm.
taken
Yeah.
25 years to do that.
Wow. This amazing, powerful story, Billy. Thank you so much for unpacking so much. And we're just starting off our discussion, but I hear you talking about restorative justice in there. I hear you talking about forgiveness and about victim offender mediation. There's so many layers of what you're speaking of, and truly you're bringing your culture into it, because the indigenous ways of being is to heal and to help, and to help the perpetrator to understand the harm that they've created. So thank you so much for sharing so much. But I think that before we dive into this topic, we need to first have a common sort of definition or discussion of what exactly is bullying. We keep throwing around the word bullying, and certainly there are different forms of bullying. So, I would like to maybe just kind of open it up, not necessarily go in order, but can anyone share here, like, if you were to be asked, what does bullying actually mean? How would you define that? Because we need to have a vocabulary to really raise awareness in the public about what it is we're talking about, so that then we can explain how this affects people's mental health. So would anyone like to start off? Okay, go ahead, Elle. Please unmute yourself, please. Thank you.
Am I okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. And as you said, there's so many different forms of bullying,
Yeah.
but I think the simple fact of it, in my opinion, is when another person, kid, adult, or whatever, tries to instill their belief or their dominance or their intimidation upon others, and that could be in many degrees. I mean, it could be minor, where a kid calls another kid a nasty name that makes the kid feel badly, or it could be a push or a shove, or it could be online where they're putting out scriptic negative notes and so forth. So when, in my opinion, what bullying is when a person, child or adult, teen or adult, feels so negatively impacted by what someone is doing to them or saying to them without an invitation. I did not invite you
Right.
to get in my face. I didn't invite you to touch me. I didn't
Right.
invite you to do any of those things. That's my opinion of it.
Right. So no consent, first of all, that's one part of that. And then it's also, you've described, it could be physical, it could be verbal, it could be mental, right? So that those are some of the things I hear you say. Anyone else? Would anyone else like to chime in?
I would love to. Thank you, Al, for that great definition. Also want to bring attention to, a lot of folks think about it as repeated acts, but it could just be a one-time, so impactful event, hurtful words. And I think that the intention or the individual that is engaging in the act of bullying seeks or intends to harm somehow or coerce, as Al was referring to. So, and it could just be one time, really. The impact is strong enough. So I just wanted to add that piece.
So when we talk about harm, so harm can be done to someone in terms of, I want to open up the word, talk about aggression, right? Because there's different forms of aggression, and I think that's what we're trying to describe. Sometimes there's, when we visualize what is aggression, people automatically think physical, and sure, physical, any type of physical violence can definitely impact another person, but what other forms of maybe subtle aggression or microaggressions perhaps exist that maybe people can fully define? That, oh, am I being, treated harmfully? Like, am I being harmed? Is somebody trying to hurt me? Like, are there other types of bullying that is not so overt that we can kind of pinpoint and say, oh, this is bullying behavior? Go ahead, Billy.
Another experience too is the silence, avoiding
Yeah.
the person can be another form
True.
of bullying.
True. True.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you don't include someone at the table, if you ignore their feelings, if you that's neglect. It's a form of neglect in the workplace that often happens. I go and do workplace assessments, and sometimes, it's there is a lot of dominance and power hierarchy in some organizations that I do consulting with. And I do see that they don't always invite everyone to the table. Not everyone's voice is heard. And that can also be a form of aggression, right? It's you not feeling welcome or included, or your voice is not important. So a lot of people from minority groups, marginalized groups, do experience greater degrees of oppression, of bullying. And I was wondering if anyone would like to speak to that from an anti-oppressive standpoint. Ozzy, I know this is a topic dear to your heart. Could you provide us with a definition of anti-oppression?
Oh, I thought you were going to ask me in
Yeah,
terms of the question.
you can combine it, but
Yeah.
basically, when we're talking, I want to talk from a macro perspective, because yes, definitely we know from a one-on-one micro, somebody's perpetrating violence on another, but from a systemic point of view, and I think Al earlier mentioned racial bullying, but there are so many systems, systemic barriers that different types of population groups do face in our society, and they are more prone to bullying and being victimized and being vulnerable. So just wondering if you'd like to share that, because I know you're so passionate about anti-oppression.
Yeah, absolutely. So just, you're absolutely right. Like the more vulnerable groups, we know Indigenous, Métis, Inuit folks, newcomers, immigrants, folks from LGBTQ plus communities, you know, uh, additional layers and barriers,
Mhm.
to accessing services, culturally sensitive and appropriate services where they can connect to their roots. And I think a part of this is really what bullying does is a lot of times trauma based. So it
Yeah.
separates the person from, who they are, their sense of self. So
Mhm.
bringing culture and practices and traditions and ways of knowing and seeing, I think helps. And being mindful of that at a macro level, policy
Mhm.
and availability of
Yes.
funding for various
Yeah.
communities
Yeah.
because there is more need, right?
Mhm.
So there's so much that we can do on a micro, meso, and
Mhm.
macro
Yeah.
level. Not one prong approach, but multi prong approach.
Mhm.
Exactly, exactly. Would anyone like to speak to the macro level? Because I think it's just so important. For example, Ozzy mentioned funding. And so if we don't feel that certain groups are worthy of receiving funding to do certain types of work or support services. Let's look at the offender population. When people are released, are there services for people to connect with community-based treatment, mental health treatment, housing, social supports, right? Does our society think that people are valued enough that they can get second chances and they can reintegrate into the community? So funding is sometimes temporary or minute, and then to achieve all those goals for the funding is sometimes challenging, right? So, would anyone like to speak to that? I mean, your program sounds amazing. And one of my questions was, how is it funded? I mean, is it through the support of, the education board, or is it private donations? Because I think funding is like a huge area to talk about, because in order to do this important work, and especially with certain groups that do need more attention, right? And in the States, I think it's how it is here with unfortunately Indigenous people here, the Black community in the US. I think that is definitely requires supports and services, and sometimes they're not well funded. If you could speak to that.
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's not. I took the program and turned it and made it nonprofit 501c3 because we were going to go out and go after grants, and that's one of the plans to do that now, to go to the grant situation, and also to, of course, as I said, we're approaching schools and seeing the benefit, having them try and see the benefit of having an anti-bullying program, social emotional training program in their schools. And I'm trying to convince administrators on a wide basis that says, we teach the kids academics, which we have to do, of course. They have to read, write, and to do well in public. We know that, but we don't focus on social emotional skills in the school system. So that's why we have all these young people out there committing these heinous crimes. And as the gentleman was, Charles was, not Charles, yes, it was Charles, I believe, said that the kids are bringing knives to school, in a big way. Everybody has a knife because everybody's saying, I need a knife to offset the potential bullying. I think what also needs to occur, and funding, there needs to be government funding too, local government funding, getting involved in the program. And then what we do now, of course, we're getting most of our funds from purchase orders and contracts from schools, but we want a broader base with actual grants.
Right.
What is happening is that many of the programs address anti-bullying. Of course, we're really unique because we use poetry and music. And I really don't know of any other program who uses original poetry and music anti-bullying program. I'm not bragging, but I'm bragging a little bit.
It's
But
okay.
Anyway, it needs to be done on a basis where it makes sense, and it needs to be done where the children and the adults are interactive, and they're good. Just to show you an example, when I mentioned it, I said I showed this book right here. I'm not trying to sell the book to anybody, but that's my poetry book. And I work now with children one-on-one in special ed. My degree is in special education, my advanced degree. So I didn't want to be in the classroom anymore because I've been in the classroom 25 years, but I still wanted to work with kids. And this one particular ninth grader doesn't like to read, doesn't like to do anything. I don't want to read. I don't need school. School's boring, so forth and so on. I said, let me introduce my book to see if it has a better impact. Maybe he can associate with bullying and the illustrations that are in the book. This kid now is reading to me. He's going, can we read another poem? Yeah, can we read another one after we finish that one? Can we read another? So we have to approach it differently than we are approaching it, as far as I'm concerned, in the educational system.
I like what you're saying, because what you're mentioning is outreach is really important to engage the child, right? And so we can't assume that people always go to get resources and social supports sometimes we have to go to the people or the communities that need it because they may not know where to get the resources. They may not know they need help. They might not know anyone even cares. And that is really important on a macro level, right? Because we're getting messages from different places where, kids I know are influenced by social media, by television, by their families, by their friends. There's so many social layers that are influencing the messages that they're getting about themselves, their value, who they are as people. And just flipping it back to what we were talking about systemically, like when we think about certain cultural groups or certain even age groups, people have this thing about youth, they're immature and so there's a lot of, I think, assumptions and stereotypes about certain groups, and those messages that are out there in society, they can influence how a person thinks about themselves, right? And how they value who they are. And so if there are no role models for me, and I don't think that there's any point in doing education or getting a degree, because you know what, like, I'm probably, no one's going to hire me, and I'm not going to have a fair chance in society, then they may not be motivated. But if they have a coach or somebody who believes in them, who's willing to support them, that can really make it for that child. And I think that is so, so important. Would anyone else? Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
So there's so many beautiful ideas here. I wanted to sort of as he was saying that, the macro and the micro and the meso, they're all sort of interrelated, all these systems connecting with each other. One of the sort of mantras in mental health that I think we see on commercials and stuff is that we're not alone, right? That this message of not alone. And part of why I bring that up is because I think when we have bullying or different kinds of violence, the act itself is sort of stripping away the value from a person. It's like it's making them very often feel alone and isolated, and like no one else understands them. And most of the people that I work with have really overactive inner critics, where they're essentially not just having this experiences of bullying that they've had from other people, but they're bullying themselves. They have this internalized bullying systems that are really hard to go through. And I think, as different people have mentioned, like Al was talking about poetry, and having creative outlets, having different ways to express oneself or to feel connected, right, is just such a valuable part of us as individuals, feeling like we're connected to a community and that we have choices, we have options.
Daniel, I really like what you mentioned, because I was hoping someone would talk about internalized bullying, because that does happen, right? Self-harm happens. And what are different ways people do it? People might, cut themselves, hurt themselves. They might use drugs and alcohol. They might put themselves in vulnerable, risky situations. There are so many ways that people, when they're angry and it's not safe for them to turn anger outward, they might internalize that anger and hurt themselves. And that's huge, right? That's a huge impact right there. I see a couple of hands. So Al, I know you had something to say, and then we'll go to Charles. Go ahead, Al.
Was it me?
Yes, you had your hand up. Sorry.
I'm sorry, I went to sleep. I just wanted to say one other thing, and then have Charles take over, is that many also, we don't approach anti-bullying in many cases in training, and I've researched a lot of the different things that are out there, is that we're not teaching and training, speaking directly to the bully to decrease and cease your inappropriate behavior. Okay, so I'm teaching them how to effectively event and prevent children and adults from being bullied, but let's work with the bully
perpetrator also. That's right. Absolutely. Makes sense. It totally makes sense. It never made sense to me when I first started working with victims of perpetrators of, and then I started working with perpetrators of violence. I said, no, this is where I should be investing my time, because they're the ones who are committing the harm. right? It doesn't make sense to just give resources for shelters and things like that to the victims. That doesn't solve this problem. So you're absolutely right. I 100% agree with you. Charles, go ahead.
Yeah, I just to talk on the financial, on their support, donor funding with this program. I think that was on a micro, because lack of funding in my more countries, like especially like in Namibia here, where we got donations and support from the United Nations or other outside agencies. I remember 10 years ago when the United Nations Children's Fund was supporting our programs. It was more effective, and we have seen reductions in bullying in schools. Also, that had a reduction, and these young boys and teachers came to say to us, "This program indeed it's working because it was fully funded by the." The moment they say, "Well, we don't find option for years; it's only just for 2 period of time." Right now, the program that is focused in Namibia here in our schools is just the girl child's program on reproductive health, and boy child is left out. But we carry with it. Like, I think to the voice of 165. Let's look at this issue and how we can bring together all stakeholders and look at the boy child, because most times in most of our countries a boy child is left out. Most programs are focused on reproductive for the young, for the women. Of course we promote, of course we want good things to happen to women, but at the same time let's also liberate and empower the young boys as well who is left out. The empowerment of women is of course of paramount importance. I truly promote it as well, I support, but at the same time also we need to liberate a young boy left. I'm talking from the Namibian perspective in my country where a boy child is left out. And this is where violence is teeming in. And these are the boys call it like, well, that's why I say for me today, bullying knows no boundary, yeah, whether you are whatever color, no boundary, you'll be all be affected. I spoke to minorities that say, well, they're too also affected by, because they took their schools to these schools, So I think collective funding is one that we need to come up. Johnson said we need to come up with, no, I like his program. No, he's doing a very effective program. If maybe this program of our Johnson can be integrated into other countries like Namibia and come together as stakeholders from various countries. And we deliberate on these issues, and we go back into a country with a fully package of resources. Sometimes, people like I spoke to various parents, they say lack of support and lack of tools. You see, people don't have the tools on how to work with the bully story. You see, because these are children who are traumatized home. Most times, like in Namibia, here is most of our homes are broken homes, and these kids are coming from the broken homes. But we are trying our best to do so. And this is, I think, this program discussion is a wonderful discussion. Thank you for that. Yeah.
I love this
Over to you.
systemic macro conversation that we're having, because what you've highlighted here is our need for building capacity. And the only way we can do that is to share resources with one another, share power, because on our own, we have limited power. But when we join forces together, united, for that one common objective to reduce violence in this world, to reduce conflict in this world, to make the world a safer place, a more peaceful society, we need to band together as one. And we need to really highlight that. And so this actually is a great segue to one of the questions that came in through social media. Is okay, we've talked a little bit about bullying and what it is and different forms of bullying, but why do perpetrators exist in the first place? Like, why are people bullying? Like, what is happening? Right? Is it a mental health issue? Is it, they've learned to, become violent as their only way of getting what they want? Is it human nature? There's various theories, right, on why people become bullies, why people become violent, why people normalize that as the way that they communicate with others. So I'm just wondering if we can just have a general, perspective on that in terms of like, why are there perpetrators out there? Like, what is that about? Okay, go ahead, Billy. Love to hear from you.
One thing that comes to mind is medication, mental health issues, um, that sometimes in the First Nations community, especially, that that's an issue with us, and that the person doesn't understand themselves of why they're behaving the way they are, and there's not involvement with the doctors, psychologists, other specialists in terms of how we could work with this. And the other thing that comes to mind too is examples of what Bullies does in the TV and movie. I'm a filmmaker of in both in TV and movies,
Cool.
and I'm a director, producer. And about 2 or 3 years ago, before the pandemic, producers got together to find out why they're not getting popularized and why people aren't going to the movies. And I won't get into that because that's another topic in itself. But I find that there's too much violence, both especially on TV,
Right.
movies, but now the music. I mean, I'm a driver as well. I do lots of things, and I'm a driver
How do you
for
do everything, Billy?
yeah,
Yeah.
that I drive First Nations kids, to and from school, or drive the parents to shopping, and the kids ask, "Oh, can I have my music over your through your radio?" And they said, "Sure." And the music that they listen to is like "Kill Your Teacher,"
Oh my
"Kill Your
gosh.
Mother," And I said, "No, you can't play that." And so I've addressed the the music industry as well about this, that it's tearing people apart in a lot of communities, but I focus mostly on the First Nations community where they are taking this seriously. Like, they listen to it so much that they act it out,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Totally. I understand what you're saying. It's that the social media, the television, all those kind of influences, what people see is what people do, right? And if kids see that and they think it's normal. I even look at the news and I see every day, like there's like, Donald Trump talking, there's all kinds of crazy things happening in the world with Russia, and there's just so much violence in reality too, like in real life, that if you're a youth living in this world, you're like the world is violent. I mean, I live in a violent world, so perhaps to protect myself, I need to, learn to be violent too. Like, I mean, I don't want to be victimized, so hey, I'm going to step up myself. So, that's just there's different ways of thinking of that. Does anyone have any other thoughts? Go ahead, Daniel.
So just lots of thoughts, but just one of them is about sorry, how to organize all this.
Of course.
There's so much going on. I'm thinking about this idea of dominance, right?
Yeah.
That one of the words that Al mentioned, and I'm thinking of messages for boys and men in particular of like, okay, I need to be on top. I need to be the best,
Masculinity, right?
Even if it means like, everybody lying at my feet and stuff like that. And of course, in a world with so many people, like none of us are ever going to be the best for long, right? There's always going to be somebody else trying to scramble on top of us. So if that's our goal, is just to sort of try to wreak havoc on one another, right? Then that's one way of looking at the world. But what if like what we're really trying to get to, it's just kind of been talked about by other people too, is like trying to get towards a more loving, kind, compassionate approach, right? Which isn't probably going to make the news. So someone went and was friendly to their neighbor, or all those kinds of little things like that doesn't usually make the news. So it doesn't seem like it's necessarily part of reality, but maybe those little acts that happen in families, that happen in communities. Maybe those are the things that really actually are stitching us together.
I think what you're saying here is it's that shock value, right? When we see something really violent and it's actually a primitive instinct that our flight or fight response acts up when we think, oh, attack or something. It's that fear, flight, right? And that is what psychologists know to play and market things so that it grabs people's attention. But I suspect there's so much violence now that people are getting desensitized to some degree. And maybe one day it will be shocking if somebody's nice and you have that random act of kindness that's presented on the news. That might be shocking in itself. But I hear what you're saying. I think it's such an ingrained thing. Those aggressive instincts. That's very primitive. It's intuitive to our minds to pick up those kinds of things, and the sensationalism, even the video games and all of that. It just grabs people's attention. But for how long? That's the question. I think Ozzy, you had your hand up as well.
Thank you. Yeah, great comments. I just wanted to chime in a bit, and a couple of other things that I see patterns is, bullies. I quote that because that could be unpacked itself. Are often hurting themselves. That's been my experience, right? So sometimes it's just aggression going inwards from environment, family, community, school. Sometimes it's a learned behavior. Sometimes folks are just scared. One of the main reasons, I used to do a bit of gang exit work a while back. One of the main reasons young people join a gang is for protection,
That's
like
right.
Al and others were speaking to, right? And I think it's a scary place. Today going to school, Charles spoke to that as well. It's a pretty scary place. And if we continue to go on with young people's minds essentially being hijacked,
Yeah.
they're not going to learn. It's
No.
not a conducive space to learn. So, and I think that these are kind of important pieces. So, and a cultural shift came up earlier. We need to shift culture so that young boys and men can reach out to talk to someone, that it's normalized, that it's a good thing. And we need Billy, yourself, like folks in the creative industry to really be at the forefront, because they athletes and creative professionals, they're so impactful in our community to be that voice, and it's very validating. So just really appreciate the comments. I love it. Thank you.
Yeah. It's some really good points there. I mean, first of all, Ozzy raised the issue of research, right? It's important to highlight how this can affect a child's mind, that they cannot learn. You can't learn in school if you're fearful for your safety. And so when we're trying to get grants and funding and trying to convince the government why it's necessary, like why it's not a completely separate subject from school, is because it's related. If our mind is not working, we can't learn, period. And so we need data, we need research, we need more people to collaborate and write papers and, talk about these things on social media. And exactly what we're doing today, and Sivam providing this forum through Voice of Men, is incredibly important. And another great point that Ozzy made is that, until recently, I mean, the reason why I was so excited when Sivam started this organization is that Voice of Men? Really? I mean, I have not heard that. It is not common to talk about men and mental health. That does not really happen until recently. And thank God. I mean, really, because, men before, it was like you just have to show you're strong and you're tough and you just have to kind of deal with things on your own. And it's so unhealthy. And so this provides a forum for men to talk, that they're humans too, and they're vulnerable too, and they have emotions too. And if we kind of dissipate those gender stereotypes that all men are just masculine, alpha male, dominant, they just want this, that's a socialization. That is something that is in the media, that is a stereotype. Men, women, whoever you are, if you're a human being, you have feelings. Even if you're an animal, you have feelings. Everyone has feelings. And so we
Mm.
cannot dismiss that. So I'm just so glad that Ozzy brought up those points. Al, I see you have your hand up as well.
Yes, I just wanted to say that I know when I'm talking to school administrators, and some of the other panel members have mentioned it, is that, and everyone has, the kids are inundated
Yeah.
with negativity from social media, from their friends, and even in some cases, in many cases, from home.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm telling ministers, what we have to do is that we have to offset that. They're being bombarded with all this
Yep.
negativity.
Yep.
Let's bombard them with poetry and music
Yes.
and other
Positive things,
to,
positive
to
thoughts. That's right.
offset that, or to and I think we don't do. And the schools, when I first started teaching school, we taught discipline, and children knew that we really cared about them, even when we were being disciplinary with them. They knew that we cared. Well, the school systems with the power that be, so to speak, in administration, well, you can't do this anymore. You can't talk to the kid that way anymore, and you can't raise your
Yeah.
voice, and you can't. I'm going, you're kidding. I said, because I've had experiences in teaching special education with kids that were gangbangers in the whole process.
Yeah.
And then when they realized, number one, that I cared about them,
Hmm.
and I had concern for them, then I could get more messages across to them. And I've seen some of them make tremendous
Totally.
transitions and transformations. Does it happen to all of them? No, it's not 100%. But if we can save 20%, 30%, maybe some of this violence,
Uh-huh.
as you were mentioning, that continues to go on. And usually when the perpetrator is usually young,
Yeah.
and I don't know if you guys, there was a 6-year-old here in the United States who shot his teacher.
Yeah.
6.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, what's a 6-year-old doing with having access to a gun?
That's
That
right.
doesn't make any sense.
No.
So
No.
we have to teach them differently and teach in school differently.
So again, there's so many layers here, right? We're talking about how do they have access to guns, right? So that's like a policy issue. That's like a political issue. That's something that needs to be talked about from a micro issue level. I mean, just having that one person who believes in you, who's nice to you, if you're not used to someone being nice to you and warm and willing to listen to your story, that can make a huge impact, as you said, Al, right? So, and because they're bombarded by all these negative images and it's constant throughout the day, and we know that the more something is repeated over and over again, we start to actually believe it. One of the areas I specialize in is cognitive behavioral therapy. And what happens is when we start repeating certain mantras, I will say, in our mind over and over again, I'm not worthy, the society doesn't value me, this is my only option, this is my only choice. I keep saying that over and over again. I start to really believe that, and that just goes into me. And then when those kind of let's say potential people outside who like gangs or other types of groups say, oh, they kind of leech off of people who have that feeling about themselves, who have low self-esteem or who don't think they have much value, and maybe this is the only way they can do it. I was thinking about Bowling for Columbine, and there's so many great documentaries that have been made about this kind of same thing. Is to feel powerful or to feel like you have something. Having a gun, just holding a gun, or feeling like you're part of a group, sometimes can give people that void that they feel inside. And that's a really huge thing. So in terms of resources, I guess this is another area that's come up. A question that is in the chat is in terms of, are there any types of resources or websites or organizations that anyone can share that can be easily accessible to all people? Because again, accessibility is another issue. I mean, if your school doesn't offer like a program or doesn't have a counseling service, or your community doesn't have those kind of things, then where do you go for help? I mean, fortunately, we have online now, so there are a lot more options available to people. But where can people go for help? Any thoughts on that? like self-help guides, or I know there's crisis lines, there's things in different communities, but I think before even accessing resources, just to answer that question from my perspective, is that you have to, be vulnerable. And there's an excellent social worker, I'm sure some people have heard, Brene Brown, where she says that vulnerability is strength. And that sort of, that thought has to really be understood, because when we're talking about weakness, I don't want to feel weak. I don't want to go for help. Like, I need a shrink. I need a counselor. Especially if you're a man or a young boy, that's not something that you want to tell your friends, like you're crying and you have feelings. So how do we first break that stigma before people saying, okay, I need help, and going for help? Earlier we talked about the fact that we might need to outreach, or, find people and say, you know what, here, like, there are some supports available, but people might be resistant to that as well. So, any thoughts about how we can break those sort of isolation points for people? Go ahead, Daniel.
So I mean, I think in my experience, like there are a lot of resources around the world, and at the same time not enough. And probably if we had a list of 1,000 different things, there might not be anything that particularly resonates for one particular person.
Yeah.
I think part of how I like to think about it is that it's a level of skill development that, the degree to which somebody actually has the initiative to say, okay, I'm looking for something and I'm going to try and find something, and that's probably going to be a better fit. Right. And, like that lovely example that Al gave of offering that book, and then that sort of whet the appetite for more. Right. So it can happen in so many things. It could happen in sort of professional therapy kinds of environments, but it could happen in all kinds of creative ventures and other ways that people connect with each other. And just one tiny point, which is one of the things that I've heard over and over again, probably especially from boys, is I don't care. And what is that? Where does that bring one to? Like, well, so if we don't care, it doesn't really matter if we bully somebody else, or if we get bullied, or if we're even alive, right? Or so being able to connect somebody with a sense of being cared for, or having something to care for, having a reason, having a purpose.
Right? Yes.
That just it's so important.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic points. Go ahead, Al. Yeah.
That's a great example, Daniel. I want to, piggyback off of that. Just give a quick, speech about what happened with one particular kid, and how if we care about them, it could change and might change their whole perspective, their negative perspective. I had a 16-year-old in a special education classroom, and he would sit back in the classroom and he would call me names and he would do all kinds of negative stuff that you're not supposed to be doing in that particular classroom. And it took me about 15 or 20 minutes to get him to do anything, and sometimes nothing at all. So something popped into my head. I used to see him drive a red pickup truck to school every day. And the red pickup truck was all souped up and everything, and had all kinds of gadgets on it. So the day that he was going to do it again, I told my two aides, I said, I'm going to step out of the class with him. I said, this time what I'm going to do is I said, I don't remember his name. I said, is that your truck outside? He said, yes, right after one of those tirades of his. I said, would you show me what's under the hood? And he relaxed, his whole demeanor changed. He said, when? I said, now. And I just thought of this off the top of my head. I said, I'm going to try and reach this kid. And it might work, it might not work, but I'll soon find out. And so what we did, we walked out of the classroom together. He pulled up the hood and he's calling off all these different things that I had no clue about. And then I'm going, oh, okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that. We walked back in the classroom together. He sat down, he opened his book, and he started reading. And I never had a problem with him again, never. Wow. And I'm going, it worked. Will that work for everyone? No, but sometimes we have to think off our feet. We have to, we can't have tunnel vision when we're trying to work with those kids. We have to go outside the box and find out where are they coming from. Okay, can I do something to touch them or in that particular area and direct them in a different direction that's more positive.
Amazing. Amazing example. I mean, in order to help anyone, first of all, I think we should talk a little bit about the helping profession. This was one of my questions here, is that we're all helpers. And sometimes people try to be too over, right? They try to impose some of their ideas, and you should do this and you should do that. They're trying to be helpful, but is that necessarily help? Or is it really, I really like, this approach where you're getting the kids to reflect on themselves and to do that inner reflection work through artistic means or creative means, or to raise awareness, raise consciousness, and helping them to see for themselves what changes they may need to make. So we talk about this in counseling, is motivational interviewing. How do we get people to engage in treatment or to help themselves? And so sometimes it's hard because they might see the helper as somebody who's being the pushy parent. And so how do we sort of break through that, especially when it comes to boys who may not want to get that kind of help? Go ahead, Billy.
I just first want to speak to the thing about how the world's going, and that it's violent, and that in a lot of ways we can't do anything. But I'm a firm believer that we can. That I've been involved in politics since I was in grade 10. I'm an alumni to the BC Youth Parliament. I'm starting my own. I won't get into that, but anyways, I written a 32-page to the United Nations about some of these things, bullying, being the example, and that we don't need, kids are bringing guns to school, elementary. I mean, my elementary school, in my time, pencil was violent, and he's got a pencil, what's he going to do with it? But today, I tell the leaders that these attitude has got to change, because the leaders themselves have been bullied by their parents. So it's a tradition that has continued on, especially in the more violent countries, and everything. And how can these things be stopped? And I've often sent letters to individual leaders, Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and over the years, about these things, making it aware that leaders need to be examples to the country, because they're not there to rule over, they're to represent the people.
Right.
And but yeah, I don't want to take out too much.
No, thank you. Thanks for sharing that. You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's another macro discussion. Love it. Al, you were going to say something?
No.
Or no, it's Charles. It was Charles. Go ahead, Charles.
Yeah, I wanted to say something on, I don't know, the issue or interesting discussion this very afternoon or this morning. Yes, last year, remember, we just had a program with the parents of our children as well. It was called He Learns Respect from You. So what you do is what he also sees. It's the program that I will be running also this year, where I brought parents of these children from various schools, 15 schools that I chose, and we took them for a tour with their parents, and we told them, look here, these children here, whatever they're doing in their schools or whatever, this bullying is what you are. They see it from you. They watch how you respect people, how you treat your other colleagues. I think this program is working as well, because sometimes we may be putting the blame of the children, but why?
Yeah.
Because back home there, that's what the parents are doing as well.
Right.
So with this program, we bring together parents and say, look here, whatever you are doing, it's affecting your child.
Very good. Yeah.
You see, it's a good program indeed. I've seen it Yeah, working together with the parents, the children, especially because like back home here, most of the kids do not have fathers. So we make use of the pastors, religious leaders, yeah, to be their coach and to be their
Mhm.
to the
Mhm.
caretaker of these children, because most boys grow up without a father figure. And
That's
I
right.
had calls from many from women who are saying that, well, I'm raising a boy. What should I do with this boy child? What should I do?
Yeah.
You get the point now. I think that's where we as men who are working this program, we need to look at to help those women who are single mothers with boys to help these boys
Right.
to be responsible men when they come into their
Very
adulthood.
good.
So he
Very
learns
good.
respect from you. So what I do, what I say is what my child here.
Hmm. Amazing. I actually, this falls into a comment that was just posted on the chat, is asking about literacy. Is there enough literacy on bullying? And I think all of you are saying the same thing. Is starts with education, and even with the actual victim or perpetrator. We can't just tell them to stop doing the behavior or necessarily like just, become empowered. It starts with education. And so there's different ways to raise consciousness, different ways to raise awareness. Obviously there's a lot of negative stuff around us, and I mean there's some things we can do about that and some things we don't have control over with respect to all the violence we see on the media and all of that. But we do have the ability to, even governments or families or any layer, just to tell them that, if you do this, you're a role model here, and what your behavior is going to affect that individual, that child. So to explain that ripple effect and the effect on mental health. And so I just kind of want to tie it all in here together, because mental health is another loaded topic. And I like the
Yes.
fact that we're talking about bullying and mental health. But the fact that when we talk about mental health, how does it affect people? Yes, it can make people become violent towards others. Sure. But aside from that, I think Ozzy earlier mentioned internal bullying. So people can take out the harm on themselves. But what other ways can mental health manifest when we're talking about bullying? So what is the link between bullying and mental health? Would anyone like to kind of share their thoughts on that?
Sure, I'd like to say a little bit about that. We definitely know that it exacerbates any existing mental health challenges that young people have, adults too. And we see this, we've seen it traditionally, but post pandemic, we're seeing exacerbated rates of anxiety, depression, eating disorders, self esteem issues, violence amongst young people, or conflict in families. It's such a web. You cannot separate the two. Substance use challenges, um, you know, people resorting to various coping strategies, right? Essentially.
Mhm.
So,
It's a really good point. And do you think that since COVID pandemic, things have gone worse? Does anyone have any thoughts around that, and how so? And it would be interesting to hear from different perspectives, because we have Canada here, we have Africa, like we have a Namibia, and we have also the US. So it's interesting that we have three different sort of areas of the world, and to get perspectives from that global pandemic. Yes, Billy, go ahead.
In
Yeah.
the pen, in
Is
the
it me?
pen.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Uh, Either one. Charles, would you like to go first? Why don't you go first, and then we'll go to Billy. Go ahead. Go ahead, Charles.
Okay, let me go first. Are you okay? Are you right? Okay, let me go
Yes.
first. Okay, I'll start. Okay, in the what COVID-19, it affected a lot of there was a lot of effect. COVID-19 affected a lot of men and women, so and there was also a high rate of violence because of the loss of jobs, and the industries were closed.
Yeah.
Men could no longer afford food. The number of violence was highly reported in this country for these past 2 years
Mm,
during the post COVID-19. So it
mm,
was extremely, extremely high, definitely, because when we went around, I was speaking on the radio to men, and I would say, if I have a problem these we can call as most men lost their jobs and they could no longer
Right.
put food on the table. And what happens now? They start now venting all their anger into their partners within their
Right.
homes. And these
Right.
are women, they could no way they can report the cases because everything was closed. Yeah, so we had a very, 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 it affected us so much, I'm telling you. Yeah, especially in my
Yeah.
country, Namibia here.
I hear
Yeah.
what you're saying, Charles. So it sounds like when there's stress, which pandemic was obviously a very stressful situation, and people are losing their jobs, and it's scary, and you don't know what the future holds.
Yeah.
Anxiety, fear, these things can
Whole
all
holes, yeah.
fuel. Yeah, and scarcity of resources, right? Does that make people become more violent or
Mm.
frustrated? I mean, is that what's going on here? And maybe Al, from your perspective in the States, do you find that it got worse with COVID, or like, what are your thoughts on that?
I would say yes and no.
No.
In the United States and like where I live in Los Angeles area is so huge.
Yeah.
But when there's nothing to do and the students are idle,
Yeah.
like they were during
Mm.
COVID, and they're trying, they look for other things to do, and some of those other
Mm,
things to do are not healthy,
it's a good
especially
point.
especially if it's online, because online cyberspace bullying is at a peak. And
Yes.
so what we try and do, we have in those 19 modules, we have two modules that directly address cyberspace bullying, and we talk
Right.
about words. Okay, if the bully uses these
Mm.
words, then look at this particular poem that says rumors online. Look at the stanzas, and let's learn the stanzas so you can just respond back. It's almost like my objective is, it's almost like when we get something from a potential scammer
Mm-hmm.
online or something, and they send it to our email address.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you ask them questions like, tell me where your office is and give me the number so I can call your office so I can find out if you're who you are and so forth. And how
Yeah.
did you meet? How do you know about me? And so you're asking these questions, and I've done that a couple of times. I got nothing but silence because I
Right.
knew they were scammers. So in essence, I'm teaching the children to, here's what you say if they say
Right.
this.
Right.
Here's how you say what you need to say when they say what they say, and let's
Right.
see what happens from there.
That.
So
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
yeah, I would say it has increased a lot since COVID, especially online.
That's a really good point. Actually, somebody from Facebook I saw wrote the message about cyberbullying and how that's really increased. And, a lot of youth are, on the internet and they're communicating, and there's different forms of cyberbullying for sure that goes on. I know, Billy, that you had a comment, and why don't we get to that before we get into the topic of cyberbullying? Sorry to have
Oh,
missed
no,
you.
it's okay.
Go ahead.
Um, with first of all, I think depression has a lot to do with it too,
Yeah.
both for the bullying and for um, the person that's getting bullied. Depression has a lot to do with it,
Hmm.
and that they don't know what to do, and the person that's getting bullied, um, the only way they see it is either bringing a knife or a gun.
Hmm.
It's there has to be alternatives of
Hmm.
reaching these kids before these things happen.
Hmm.
But as for the pandemic, I'm not sure about other
Mm.
places, but I'm sure it does. Is that we've lost so many businesses
Hmm.
closing because of the pandemic. Not enough businesses, so they had to close, or property taxes, or whatever it is, has closed. So parents are depressed,
Yeah.
fathers are mad,
Yeah.
kids are mad, and so they go to school like this.
Right.
There's that old. I run 3 organizations and 3 businesses, and among the things that I've learned is don't bring your problems home,
Mm. Mm.
and
Mm.
don't go to bed angry as well,
Hmm.
and yeah. So
Yeah. No, that's a great link again between bullying and mental health, right? So, I mean, people who are perpetrators, they might be going through their own stuff, and that's why they're perpetrating violence on others or themselves, right? And I think Ozzy mentioned earlier that you could be a perpetrator, but you could also be a victim. And it could be an isolated incident. Doesn't mean it's a pattern of behavior. It could be just a single incident. And I think Al also brought up the point that sometimes people are bored. It doesn't mean or angry or anything. If you're at home and you're bored and you're not at school and you don't have any meaningful hobbies to engage in, then just out of boredom, people use drugs and alcohol as well. Or just out of boredom, people eat. Or just out of boredom, people say, hey, let's go on the internet and find out who's there and let's start stalking them and harassing them and doing all kinds of stuff. So boredom is also a trigger sometimes for bullying. I was wondering if anybody would like to talk a little bit about cyberbullying and what your thoughts are, because I know a lot of youth, a lot of young men, that is also one way that people get recruited, for gangs or for groups that are engaged with these kinds of things. And sometimes there are those scam businesses or crank calls. I remember we used to do when we were kids, but there's a whole bunch of things that people are doing online as well now, whether that's from boredom or just for other reasons. Go ahead, Al.
Yeah, there are in my book we have five. I wrote 5 or 6. I think it was 5. Anti-cyberspace bullying poems, and we go over those things thoroughly. Because what we now do, our program is that, like the school we just had a contract with, we're going to start in the fall. We're going to teach the teachers how to teach my program or our program in their classroom. So, we don't have to be there. The teacher, okay, here's how you teach this poetry to your children. And then, of course, you innovate, at your own discretion. But here are specific steps that we have found that work. So we do it that way. And in essence, I teach children, and I give them the story of myself growing up in Kansas City, Missouri, Jonesboro, Arkansas. It's in the South.
Mm-hmm.
And growing up around overt racism and segregation. And I remember how someone else made the comment about how these things can affect you all the way into childhood. Into adulthood, being bullied. It can just last and last and last.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew when all this was going on, at some point as a child, I was looking in the mirror and I was asking myself, what's wrong with me? Why are they calling me names? Why can't I go over there? Why? So I'm a kid. My parents are trying to explain what's going on. I'm a kid who's moving into a different generation of thinking. And I'm wondering, why are they doing this? So when I'm teaching the program and I'm telling children, I learned that those negative words that they were saying to me, whatever it was, they're the idiots, not me. And if I learn to avoid that and get away from that, or to say something that doesn't provoke a fight, then I'm winning and I'm not going to be bullied.
Love that.
So tell children and adults the same thing about bullying online.
Mm-hmm.
Use these words to offset their words. It's going to make you feel better. It's going to make them feel less empowered. You're going to become more empowered. And pretty soon you're going to go, I don't care what you say. I know you're the fool. I'm not.
Yep. I love that. I love that so much. And I think that having community and support is so essential. So for me to, reinforce those positive thoughts towards myself and to believe what I'm saying to myself, having that support system, even if it's one person in your life, having a mentor, having a coach, having a friend, having someone who really cares about you is so important. And it starts from that, and also building support groups. I mean, I've started to see some support groups online even develop for people who have been victims of bullying, who share their stories with one another, who come together and kind of just encourage and empower one another, give each other resources and supports. I mean, I think that's a huge area, and this falls into our last discussion of the day, is solutions. And I think we've talked about it's a multi-pronged approach, right? Because there's many layers and there's so many various forms of bullying. There's a micro, there's a meso, there's a macro. And so as we're doing our checkout, just like we did a check-in and you introduced yourselves and shared a little bit about what you're doing and what you hope for this subject matter is if we could leave with some thoughts about some solutions and what can we do as a community, as society, as just average individuals. We don't need special education or special talents, but just as human beings, what can we do to kind of, play a role in making a difference? So, why don't we start with Billy this time, because you started last before. So I'd like to hear from you what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I really love this in that people from different parts of the world are coming together to create ideas of working towards improving not only the individuals, but groups and different parts of the society. And that I'm a firm believer is that my mom, when I met her for the first time when I was 40, she always said to me before she died in September 2018, is that if not you, who?
I like that. I like that. That's
So, yeah.
right. Yeah, it can be anyone, and it starts with the person. Like anyone, everyone is important. Anyone is like one drop in the ocean, but together it's a wave, right? Absolutely beautiful. Okay, and then Daniel, I'll turn to you.
I love that waves of the ocean. Yeah, that's beautiful. I think for me, a lot of this things can go different ways, right? We can be the bully, we can be bullied, we can try to sort of get out of that cycle, right? We can be caught up in the suffering and the trauma and the difficulties, and those things are real. And then there's also opportunities that come out of those, right? There are ways that we can try to turn those words, as Al and other people have said, from weapons into, instruments of healing, right? And we can try to see, like, within hopelessness, there's hope is embedded in that word, and there's always ways to get through if we have the intention and the will to try to see ourselves as more than just like this bad thing that we've been told that we are, or that
That's right.
that there's good to be brought out into the world.
I just want to quickly say something about that, because one of my first jobs was working at the John Howard Society. And when I work with offenders, I said, okay, that is a behavior you did. That's not who you are. And if people just define who they are by one thing, it's wrong. It's just wrong to label yourself like that. And people do make mistakes and people can change. And you have to see your goodness too. Because even if you did something wrong, you also have beauty in you. And it's about recognizing that and bringing that out. So thank you for sharing that. Charles.
Vinita, I'm just mindful. I think
Words to say to share with me. Words to
Just,
say. Can you hear me?
yeah, can hear you. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah, with me is just short words I just want to share with you. Yeah, just my departing words for this morning and evening and afternoon is another world is possible if we all come together.
Yeah. Well, to continue this
That's
conversation.
no, it's possible if all of us we come together, and there must be
Yeah.
there must be a political will again. Political is needed. So another world is possible.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
I believe
Thank
in
you.
that world.
Thanks. Okay, Ozzy, your turn.
I'm going to let Al take over because I know Al has
Yeah,
to
has to
run, and then
go.
I'll go right after.
Okay, sure. Sounds good. Thank you.
Thanks, Ozzy. I appreciate that. I'd like to thank everyone for, first of all, having me on the panel. It's been enjoyable. I've learned. My ears are always open for learning, so I've learned so many things from all of you. And I'm just going to leave with if it's all possible, I would love for us to find a way to work together at some point with the different areas that you have, film and the psychology and the whole process. And Charles and Daniel, let's get together as I think Daniel said.
Yes.
So by grouping together, we can make a powerful
That's
impact
right.
on
That's
the
right.
world.
I love it.
So I
Yeah.
have another meeting I have to go to. So thank you guys, and I
And
look
thank
forward to
you.
hearing from
Thank
you.
you. Nice to
Yeah.
see you. Thank you so
Okay.
much for your
Bye-bye.
time. Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Okay. And then we have Ozzy, and then Sivam will end off. Go ahead, Ozzy.
Sure, yeah. Just want to echo that it would be a great idea to connect like-minded, community-minded folks around the table. But a couple of things that we could do, obviously at a macro level, advocacy. I believe in for universal mental health for all, especially young people. So advocate to your politicians, MPs for funding and really looking at that, as well as just advocacy in the school systems. I'm mindful, I have a lot of teachers on my roster as well, and I know they're very stretched, so I'm mindful of not putting this work on them, but getting mental health professionals, because
Just to
anyways,
come
they
in.
do have the training to go in, because I know that where we're at, our teachers are overwhelmed.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just a piece around parents believing young people when they go to you, asking
Yeah.
questions about their day, doing that advocacy work with the school and teachers and administrators at the at that level of operating schools, you know recognize and believe young people, and know that it's important to intervene, because a lot of times I've heard stories that necessarily is not the case when young people go to adults. So just being mindful of that, and just wanted to say thank you. What a great opportunity. I'm so honored to be in your presence. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we're honored to have you here as well. I just want to say that it was such an honor to host this panel discussion. I love being amongst like minded people, social change makers, people who want to make the world a better place. And I think that's why wanted to be a part of this panel. Like I said, I was personally bullied in my life, not as a youth, not just as a youth, but also in the workplace. And that's how I got into IO psychology. And I also help a lot of organizations, workplaces where there is discrimination, there are different forms of bullying that take place. Sometimes there are unions that get involved, sometimes there's not. There's lots of different layers to that. And maybe one day we can have a discussion around workplace mental health and workplace bullying. I think that's an area that I really think is important as well. But just coming back to youth and men, again, I think it's important for all of us to raise consciousness out there, whether it's social media or amongst our own networks, um, anywhere, that boys and men, their voices matter, and we should have forums for them to also express themselves, express their views, and come together, find groups. So that would be great. Anyways, thank you so much. I think that the last point I want to make is that in any of our jobs, any of our work, not just personally, but in my work as a professor, I try to use role play to teach counseling skills to my students. Or if I'm, conducting some workshops with leaders in companies, I try to also show them what it feels like. So I think Charles is the one who said, let's start with talking about compassion and love. And I think Ozzy also echoed that sentiment. So if we keep love as our sort of mission, our objective, common goal, I think that whether it's micro, meso, or macro, it really converges as one mission. And so thanks again, Sivam, for having me on. I appreciate this opportunity, and I'll turn it over to you for your announcement.
Thank you very much. Thank you guys. It's really amazing to see and hear all of you guys, each one of you guys, and it's a last minute call, I would say, to find the people and also the other things. But One thing I want to mention, there's a one woman, uh, she had, I asked him to send a message, and then she was ready to record, but she didn't have enough time. But we could have a voice, the experience we could hear from the youth. So we always we want to hear, but I tried my best to bring at least a couple of youth when we have a mix of different background and panelists. We can kind of have different flavors too. But before I close, I want to have quick announcements, a few of them. Really,
Thank you.
one thing is that we're going to have two actually special events coming week. Special presentation on naloxone and managing opioid overdose, Tuesday, May 16th from 7 p.m. to 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Presenter Kent Quindon, pharmacist and owner of Respect RX Cornwall. Actually, you can join through Zoom, but you have to register first. And link is available on our Facebook. If you guys mute yourself, that would be great. And the other thing is that you can also fill out the Google form to receive a free naloxone kit. This is very important. So get the training, and you can save lives. We will have another special 90-day supporting session, Men Springing into Action, starting on Wednesday, May 24th at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Two special facilitators will be discussing and helping out our men with their relationships, business, finance, fitness, spirituality, mindfulness, and productivity. Please register. The link is, of course, on Facebook. And if you can see the poster, actually, you can scan or you can basically scan the poster, and you can register. You will have the QR code. And the other regular activities is open up on Sundays once a month on 10 a.m. 7 p.m. Eastern Time, and also Willie Tamil Live Talk Show Eastern Time, 8 a.m. on Sunday. And all of our podcasts are available on 6 platforms: Google Play, iPhone, and Spotify. Monthly men's group meeting, only for men by men. Second Tuesday of every month from 6 p.m. to 7:30 p.m. through Zoom. The next one will be on Tuesday, June 13th. There are no limitations to gender, age, nationality, or ethnic groups. All walks of life can participate in any of our shows. If you want to be a guest on any of our shows or willing to be part of our organizations and help us directly or indirectly, please reach out to us. We would love to work with the individuals, professionals, experts, community organizations, associations, corporations, government officials, and businesses. Phone number is 226-289-8784. Email address info@voiceomen360.org. Website www.voiceomen360.org. You can find us on all the social media: Facebook page and group, and Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, VoiceOmen 360. Two things I want to ask every one of you guys, the audience and everyone. One thing is that, yes, you are listening and watching the episode and other panel discussion and everything. But one thing you will be hearing or listening to, but at the same time, by sharing with others. That's the way we can create or reach out more people. And at least we can make some kind of a positive impact. So we can reach out more people. So that's what I would like to ask you guys, not only just listening, but also want to reach out to more people, share. At the same time, the main goal is that at least if we can change one life, one mindset with the one word or the whole discussion, that's all I want. The effect, or we don't have to worry about the number of people that are going to change. At least one man, one mindset, we can change it. That's all we want to. All right. Thanks a lot, guys. I really appreciate all of you guys. Really appreciate the amazing discussion. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks. Goodbye.